Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So I finished this book called Rikers, An Oral History by Graham Raymond and Revin Blau. This is what the cover looks like, okay? And then here's the back of it. Okay, I read the whole thing. It's a tale, basically, on accounts by people who were prison wardens, corrections officers, inmates about New York City's Rikers Island jail complex. Malfunctions of the facility, so it's like a very... And a unique layout of the book is that it has sections about the history of people who've tried to kind of make change, and the politics, inner politics. And I wanted it to be more gruesome, to be quite honest with you. Maybe that's a bit of my macabre self. But for the most part, I just kept saying to myself, well, you're in prison, and it's not really supposed to be that great. Now, I do think that, as I mentioned in the past, inmates should not be allowed to just lay around, eat, masturbate, and have homosexual relations. They should instead be put to literal physical labor. And if they're on parole, like let's say they're going to have a chance to go to parole, they can work and save up some money, and that there should be skill training. But for inmates who are going to be there for life, they should have to contribute and not just be a net resource drain. Okay? The prison should have to use their labor and sell commodities in order to furbish things. But it's hard to do because so many of these inmates are dangerous and make weapons. There's the whole thing in here about the violence of the inmates upon each other, gang activity, smuggling of drugs. But let me just point some things to you. So there was a whole section on gangs and Rikers. And you'll have things by individuals, and that's a unique layout of this book. Is it'll go like Rick Lombardi, retired DOC gang investigator, 1990 to 2011. We'll say a paragraph. Next paragraph will be Hector Pastor Benny, Custodio Latin King leader, detained 1991 to 1994, and then he'll have a paragraph. Okay, and they talk a lot about how there was Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, slashings, and all that stuff in there going on. They get into people who come in from the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Harlem, and what that's like. And I found it unique how much the phone plays a role. Like, some inmates will pressure people to not have as much phone time or have as much phone time as they like. Commissary becomes important. There's a lot of racial segregation that the inmates do amongst themselves. Okay. And then there's an excerpt here I wanted to share with you by Dupre Harris. He was detained in 1990 to 2000. And there's just some stuff here I thought was interesting. One of the things that you need to do is that you have to read. A lot of guys, they were ignorant. I don't care if it was the newspaper, Bible, Quran, whatever literature that was at your disposal, you had to read it. And then, if you didn't know how to read it, let it be known. And one of the brothers would assist you in reading and understanding. And then it goes on further to say, there was basically a unified code. There was just a set of goals that we wanted to reach. If you wanted to use the word code, I don't want to say code, but it was a thing. Like if you were going to pull together, you gotta make sure you hold your brethren down. You know what I'm saying? The main thing was we weren't going to leave no brother behind. And so you get to see the inner relations and things that needed to be done. I do think that the air conditioning, with today's technology, put solar panels on the prisons. You know, you can't have people in there with no sense. Like if they're sweating and they're close to each other, scabies, different skin irritation and illnesses come up. It's not hygienic. You don't want prisons to be a place of disease spreading, you know. And then there was Um, lots of swearing, which it was actually pretty interesting because they captured the voice of the person quite well, and I thought that was great. So they didn't censor and like edit what these people were talking about. Here was an interesting one about violence, and it was by this guy named Barry Campbell, detained 1980s, 1990s. He says, "I've walked with the razor in my mouth. I remember when they moved me over to the adult dorm. The first thing I did when I went in there was cut somebody because I wanted them to know that this was not a game, and I was coming to claim a certain slot time on the phone. So I took my blanket, dropped it on my bed. I looked around, looked at somebody in the day room, saw that the kid was on the phone, and I just picked him out to be the one that I was going to make my name off of." So that is an honest depiction, and it reminds me a lot of high school and junior high, where you had to put in some type of physical event to show that you weren't someone to mess with. This is a very common human trait. And if you've never been in a situation around a bunch of people who can pop off at any time, then it won't make sense to you. In the corporate world, you don't use someone's pronouns, you're fired. You're going to get a write-up. But in a place where violence rules, it's just a total different law structure. A total different rationale. And then there was another one here from Barry Campbell. "You're talking about people being stabbed left and right. I've always been about 100 pounds soaking wet. So the way I survived was being more brutal than anybody else in there. That was my way of ensuring that nobody would ever mess with me or try to take what was mine. Early on, I understood that violence rules, and I understood that if you were willing to go further than anybody else was, then you were pretty much the one who was in charge. And so I was always the one willing to go further than everybody else, because I was always smaller than everyone else. It's like the Napoleon complex. You feel you have to do so much more because everyone is bigger and stronger and physically more powerful than you are. So you tend to let weapons do the talking for you. Whether it's razors or the wash bucket or just the mop itself, whatever you can lay your hands on. And so I found that to be unique. I think they should have focused more on the violence. There was a whole section in the back that was like politics and stuff, which, I mean, that's important. Like, you want to improve Rikers and you want to have it that way. Now, they want to put Trump in Rikers and they want to put P. Diddy in Rikers. So it's fascinating that I finished this book and Rikers is in the news. It's not like California, we have San Quentin. Another famous prison is Pelican Bay. There's prisons that are notorious for the way they operate, and Rikers is one of those. Okay? Here's another one by Barry Campbell. Other times, it's just because I was in a bad mood, Somebody would come in the house and he would go to one person and he would take that person's phone time, and I'd be like, "I don't like you, motherfucker. You ain't all that." And I'd just go and beat him up and take the phone time back and just give it to somebody at random because there was nothing else to do. You were bored. So, violence was a change in the norm, so to speak. You did things not because somebody told you to, or you just didn't like that person. There were days when you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and somebody was gonna catch it. This is an important lesson to teach your kids, when they go to public school, is that sometimes when someone lashes out at you, it really has not much to do with you, but rather their impulse control, and how boredom isn't just this malevolent thing. A lot of people pretend boredom is something that just is peaceful, whereas people get bored plucking wings off flies, playing with matches. Boredom can be destructive. So be mindful when people pretend boredom is just this soft energy. Rather, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Donovan Drayton. They're not just going to take it from me or roll over me. The real world, the same way too. You can't be pushed over from the corporate world to the streets and let somebody take your stuff. If they think they can take it, they're going to keep on taking it. You know what I'm saying? So, what I like about it is, as I mentioned, let's see if you can see. See how, like, there's paragraphs? And it'll have, like, what they say. So people coming in and taking your stuff, that's a problem too. You're in there, and you have your items and such, and there's people in there with deep-rooted mental illness. They have no manners, or they just become plain insane because they're in this cell. And they're becoming a cancer, and so they spread that out to other people. I would have written like a book on prison as more of a, you don't want to go here, so obey the law. I feel like this book was more of, feel bad for these prisoners, so abolish prisons and decriminalize a bunch of stuff so less people go to jail. That was the vibe. I also think that the vibe from the text was the prison needs to be updated, and corrections officers need to be, they need to have a new regiment where they're not burnt out, right? Here's another one from Gregory Pierce, detained 1983 to 2015. When I was there in 1983, a guy approached me telling me I'm going to be his bitch, and I wasn't having it. So I went inside my room, took my toothbrush, sharpened my toothbrush on the floor so it had a little point on it, and I came out the room and I stabbed him 3 or 4 times. I stabbed him here and up here, indicating the chest. I seen him upstate too. I did it straight up. He didn't say nothing. He was too busy screaming. The guards came and grabbed him. You gotta survive. Ain't nothing feminine about me. So ain't nobody doing nothing, you know? I don't know what his problem was, but I tried to solve it for him. He's lucky I didn't have something better to sharpen it with, like a piece of metal, 'cause I'm being honest, I would have killed him. Now this one was one of my favorites, so I put a star next to it. Ain't nothing about me feminine. I think, remember when I was reading that radical feminist book and she was contending how men support R-word culture, right? SA culture. But if you notice here, this inmate, former inmate, because he was released in 2015, Gregory Pierce, he sees that a guy's telling him, I'm gonna commit this to your bum, I'm gonna R-word you. And he's like, no, I'm not becoming your bottom. That's not me. And he does what he has to do to defend himself. I think in cases where, like this, I mean, these guys should not catch extra charges, in my opinion, if they're defending themselves, whether offensively or defensively, taking measures to stop someone from committing the conspiracy to R-word them. I get how there could be false accusations and such, but it is such a painful and dangerous thing, and men in prisons have to suffer with that, and it shouldn't be tolerated. And if someone takes drastic measures to preserve their rectum's virginity, then I think that's a valid cause. So this book serves as a sort of wake-up call for many people that if you're going to go in there, there's men in there waiting to do such atrocities as that. And so even though it's very graphic, we can learn from it. And, you know, Earth is a very violent planet. And so I don't mind seeing and reading and hearing about things, measures people took in order to preserve their bodily autonomy, right? And then there was another one here. Gary Hayward, former correction officer and former detainee 2000s. There was an inmate who was disrespectful to a female officer, inviting her to his private parts. Said he would throw feces on her. She called us to her area and he didn't stop with a verbal assault. We opened up his cell and tuned him up. There were no cameras inside the cells. I guess they didn't want to spend too much money. We tuned him up and we got him in his line. Smacked him in the face. You hit them where it's not gonna leave too many bruises. You're not going to leave marks, but he's going to know why he got his ass beat. There was a rule that if an inmate touched an officer inappropriately, he had to go to the hospital. Mandatory. What I appreciated about this was the honesty, right? And you could see how the corrections officers have their own culture with the inmates. The inmates have their... So the whole inmate and correction officer dynamic amongst themselves, so the prisoners have their own dynamic. It's like a Venn diagram. And then there's this overlap between the meeting of the two worlds. And then the corrections officers' relations with themselves and then with their higher-ups. It's really fascinating. And I have said that women shouldn't be corrections officers. And she was getting poop thrown on her. They had to deal with males flashing their male members. And I remember not too long ago, they were catching female officers having intimacy with the inmates. And it's just a mess. And they're not as physically strong as men. And being obese and out of shape doesn't make you strong. It just makes you have more labored breathing. You know? A skinny woman may not be able to, as easy to be pushed down as someone who's overweight. But being overweight and having a gut doesn't really make you like this brick house, you know? But I appreciated that type of honesty. There's another one here by Casimiro Torres, detained various stints, 1980s to 2000s. Even when you are sleeping in your cell, someone can stab you or set you on fire. It's not normal to be under that pressure all day. It takes a tremendous toll on you. If someone takes a paperclip from me, it makes me really, really angry. It makes me feel victimized. That's how I felt in jail. I can be a little more aggressive at silly shit, like someone is not looking you in the eye when they talk to you. It's not normal, and it's not the way it should be. So aggressive at silly shit. Now, I have often talked about how when I grew up around violence, right, because I grew up around street gangs, there's this sort of impulsive reaction to affronts, whether real or imagined, that means you need to go through anger management and reassess the situation. And Islam really helped me to gain patience on my moods and stabilize my emotions and to become more stoic and mellow. And so I think it's brilliant that people get Islam into the prisons, and this can help people, even though there's going to be conditions in there. There will be a test and trial for the inmates, no matter what, because these are some of society's rejects stacked on top of each other like sardines, and they have pent-up testosterone, and they don't have women around to kind of relieve that tension, and they're not getting physical exercise to get that anger out, so it comes out in the most odd ways. But people being lit on fire was mentioned in here, and then not being able to have peaceful sleep, and I found that to be something we should appreciate on the outside, you know. So if you're having a conversation with youth who are in gangs, tell them about prison, a liberal will say abolish prisons, defund the police, and just send social workers. That's not really going to work with every type of person. Some people have to be scared straight. They have to hear the horrors so that they can regulate a new compass for their life. And so, reminding youth that your sleep is very important, and there's always going to be guys bigger than you, and you can easily be outnumbered, and you should watch that, and you should not want to go to prison. And it's insightful to see what people go through. There was another one here about solitary confinement. Donovan Drayton. Well, me, I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not giving myself too much credit. But I'm really mentally tough. Everybody's not mentally tough the way I am. I feel like mental toughness is a different aspect of being strong. The box for the not so strong-minded individuals will break you. That's why people are coming out crazy or on medication. Never was on medication before. Now you're on medication. So the box, solitary confinement. A lot of people say ban solitary confinement. I think that there's a good element to it in certain bouts. There's a whole history of that type of punishment. But it's also a punishment to not ever be alone. I remember seeing footage of some overcrowded prisons, and there's these bunk beds in an open space, so you don't have any privacy. Okay, you everything you do, there's always someone there. You have no alone time in your own little zone. But then putting someone in a cell by themselves without human contact, is difficult as well. So you begin to see the balance and dynamics of human psyche, right? Our minds. The perfect balance of human interaction versus a time to be alone and mellow out and have introspection and flow with your thoughts. And so people can go crazy and then not really know what to do. So I won't share, obviously, all the quotes. I was thinking going through it on the channel, but I think I will let you explore the text yourself. It's a unique book. I wish it could have been more dark. There's Piper Kerman, who was an author as well, with Orange is the New Black. That was a Netflix show. It gave commentary on the back, and it's made the rounds, and it's been popularized in a lot of liberal bookstores. So I thought, why not read it? And it wasn't, I would say it was an easy read. It wasn't like I had to force myself to keep going. But it's one that I'm not going to keep in my personal library, so I'm going to put it in the recycle bin or give it away. Not to be rude to the author, but I only have so much space, and I can only keep certain types of texts, that I have like spiritual, or like I can go back to again and again and again to extract information from. But and they made their money anyways. I bought it, so they made their money, and there's no harm in that. I'm not trying to be insulted, but good read. But next time, volume 2, I want more sad stories. Okay, but I understand how people don't want to snitch or say too much out of shame and embarrassment, or they don't want to reveal secrets of how they operate. But it would be cool to have a bit more juiciness of intrigue, that's factual, but profound in a way, right? Not too many books about prisons out there. Maybe I'm just so used to hearing gulags and like torture chambers and Spanish Inquisition to where I'm more of like, give me the meat, right? But to someone who's never read and isn't interested in those macabre topics, this would probably be like a beginner's level, right? But that's just me. Let me know and what you think, and maybe you have another book similar to that. But I just want to let you know what I'm getting up to. Yeah. See you later.